Okay, good afternoon. This is a paper with Graham Smith. And as you have probably seen, this is a paper with no hard data still in it. It's a paper with basically where we develop the theoretical framework and we develop the methodology we are on the process of using, but we are still at the moment of data collection, so we have no hard data to present. As I will explain in a minute, the universe, the reality we analyze is quite an outlier in this workshop. It's different from what most of you are doing. But I think it makes sense to be here because at the end, the main research question is the same. It's how, why, in which circumstances citizen inputs are incorporated or not into public policies, right? The difference in this case is in the kind of citizen inputs. What we analyze here, the universe we are analyzing, is the result of local participation processes. Local participation processes which are most often developed by local authorities, or at least they are somehow involved in these processes. And this can include an Agenda 21, a participatory budget, any kind of public assembly, a local referenda, whatever. But a local process of consultation to citizens which produces some kind of policy proposals. Then what we try to do is to see what happens with these policy proposals. Why do we think this research is relevant? In all this literature about participatory mechanisms, policy effects are assumed to be one of the main reasons why these participatory processes are being developed. These participatory processes at the local level are becoming more common, more popular in many countries, and one of the main arguments that we find in the literature is because this will improve the public policies being implemented as a result. However, the general impression of the limited literature which exists about this is that these effects are limited, that in most cases public policies do not change much, that these participation processes have only a limited effect on the final public policies. In any case, our main research question is not as much whether these effects are very strong or very limited, but which are the factors that help us understand that they vary, that sometimes they are very influential and that sometimes they have no influence at all. So that would be a bit the general framing of the paper. Part of in fact, what some of the existing literature has done is to study this, to look at whether the cities which have been more ambitious in their participatory programs, people live better than they lived earlier, or whether they have improved more their life than in cities where these participatory processes do not exist. But the impression is that we don't know much about what happens in between of this. And what we try to do is to analyze what's happening here. Immediately after these policy proposals are approved in the participatory processes, and with one of the main ideas in mind that we had from the beginning, and this is why we chose this word for the titling the research project, is that politicians will cherry pick among these policy proposals, that they will get several proposals from citizens and they will simply take those that are more interesting, less costly, more attractive for whatever reasons, or which are in accordance with their previous political program. In fact, this project is the follow-up of a previous one, which had as a main characteristic, which makes it an outlier in this field, that we try to use a large N strategy. No? In this participatory processes literature, there are very interesting, extremely good research being produced, but most of it are in-depth case studies based on 1, 2, sometimes 4 cases of participatory processes, of using a sampling strategy which is reasonable, but which at the same time is problematic, which is choosing on the dependent variable, no? Taking only the best cases. So there is a lot of research being produced about the participatory budgeting in Porto Alegre, which is a complete outlier, no? And there is no much being done about the participatory process, which I'm sure exists in Leicester, right? So the book which just came out this week was trying to make a mapping, analyzing why this participatory mechanism appear, what do they do, and here we studied only the attitudinal consequences they have on participants. And what we do in this second project is to analyze other kind of consequences, which are the policy consequences. But we use the database which was produced in the previous project, where we have a quite extensive mapping of participatory processes being developed. In this paper and in the new project, we use only the Spanish cases. Here it was, in the first book, it was Italy, France, and Spain. But since the policy process may be quite different, to make it more contextually homogeneous, we use only the Spanish cases for the second project. So what we do in the paper is, first of all, we try to map, no, all the potential explanations, the most important variables that we should try to collect, to measure. And here, basically, we are analyzing things at 3 different levels. First of all, we are analyzing contextual factors at the municipality level. We have a list of factors which are related to the characteristics of the different municipalities we are going to analyze. Second, within some of these municipalities, we will use different participatory processes. So we have a second level of analysis, which are the characteristics of the participatory process itself. For example, one of the main variables I will show in a minute is that some of these participatory mechanisms have in their design a very strong link to policy making. This is the case, for example, with participatory budgeting, where it's very clear that the main aim of the process is to produce a budget, a local budget. So it's very clearly policy oriented. Whereas in deliberative opinion polls, the main priority is to see whether citizens change their values as a result of deliberation, but there is very often a very weak link with any kind of real policy process. So we have coded a series of very different characteristics of the participatory process itself, and then we have a third type of variables which are at the policy proposal level. And for each of the policy proposals that we are going to analyze, we code a series of characteristics of this proposal. For example, whether this represents a strong challenge to the status quo, whether this proposal is related to what the local administration is supposed to be doing, whether the proposal had a very strong level of support in the participatory process, or it was one in a list of many with no special level of support. What about the methodological design? As I mentioned, we use only the Spanish cases, but to have some contextual variation, we take 3 different regions which are quite different in several senses, in left-right predominance, in the degree of development of the participatory culture, and so on. We include variation at these 3 levels I just mentioned, no? At the local and regional context, at the participation process level, at the level of policy proposals. So we have here about I think it's 28 municipalities, 40 different participatory processes, and within each of these participatory processes we take our main unit of analysis are the policy proposals. Sorry. In those municipalities that have a limited number of proposals, we take all of them. In those participatory processes that have too many proposals, that have, for example, 200 proposals, we take only 20 of them. We make a random sample of these proposals. And the general universe we use is all the participatory processes that have been developed in these 3 regions during the legislative period, but between one local election and the next, 2007 to 2011. We try to avoid going too far on time because it would be very difficult to rebuild the memories, but we need a few years so that the local municipalities have had some time to really develop these policy proposals and to make them into real policies. So that's a bit of a summary. We started with the mapping had produced. We had a database with 800 processes, but some of these processes, when we go into the details, they are not really good. They were called participatory process, but they have no real participation. Some of them have no specific policy proposals. Some of them are out of the temporal or territorial framework. So we end up having 192 policy proposals. No, sorry. Participatory processes. From these 192, we stratify the sample and we take 40 participatory processes, and within this we take a maximum of 20 proposals per process. And then, so the idea is that maybe we will collect around 600 policy proposals with information on 50 variables at the 3 levels that I have already mentioned. Basically, this is the main independent variable we have used to stratify the sample. The 4 types of participatory processes that we are using. Participatory budgeting, other kinds of strategic planning, and the distinction between permanent and non-permanent mechanisms. And that's just a very preliminary evidence about the kind of, the number of policy proposals that they have. As we can see, there is room for cherry picking, since most of the participatory processes have more than 25 proposals. So the number of participatory processes that have a very limited number of proposals is really small. So a few provisional conclusions. As I was saying, this scope for cherry picking exists. Some of the problems we are facing during the field work is that sometimes it's difficult to establish which is the outcome of the participatory process, which is the final list of proposals. In the case of a referenda, it's very easy to know, either the yes or the no won, but here sometimes we have very long documents that do not make clear which are exactly the proposals that citizens made. This is clear that somewhere over the process there are technical arguments being introduced, but sometimes these technical arguments were being introduced during the participatory process itself. Sometimes they are being introduced later on. We have the final list of proposals, and then the municipality says, okay, but we have to drop some of them because they are not really valuable, they are too expensive, or they make no sense at all from the technical point of view, and this is a difficulty that we have to deal with, that the incorporation of these technical arguments appear at different moments in the participation policy process. And finally, one of the difficulties is that it's difficult to find hard evidence in many of the cases. It's difficult to find strong evidence that policy implementation has existed or not, or there have been important changes respect to the initial proposals. We are able to get opinions from diverse actors, from technicians in the municipality, from local politicians, from opposition politicians, but very often it gets difficult to find documents that provide hard evidence. This is all. Thank you.